Rain hammered the iron roof of the black serpent base while blood dropped onto the clean marble floor. Kneeling in front of the most feared boss in Seoul, 19-year-old Ji-woo did not move. Even with a loaded gun pressed against her head, she calmly poured tea, looked syndicate boss Kwon Tae-jun right in the eye, and whispered, "You built an empire on shadows, but your own blood will drown you before dawn." 3 years later, bright camera lights flashed in a crowded Seoul courtroom. A federal judge slammed his heavy gavel down and shouted, "The house of Kwon has fallen." Have you ever wondered what happens when great power meets true loyalty? Or what happens when the person you trust most turns into a knife in your back? Today, we step into the dark and dangerous world of Seoul. A cold mafia boss finds his whole empire falling apart, and the only person who can save him is the quiet maid he thought was useless. Drop a comment below. Can true loyalty survive a billion-dollar betrayal? Now let us jump right into the story. Kwon Tae-jun was the most feared leader in the Seoul syndicate, and he almost never went into the dark, neon-lit slums of Gangnam without an army of guards. But on one freezing winter night, his heavy armored car broke down right next to a narrow, dirty alleyway. Sitting in the shadows was 10-year-old Min-seo. She was a tough orphan who used stolen tech to hack into local security cameras just to find food and stay alive. When Tae-jun stepped out of his car, he looked at her like she was nothing. With a sneer, he tossed a thick envelope stuffed with cash right at her dirty shoes, expecting her to grab it like a stray dog. Min-seo did not even look down at the money. Instead, her eyes narrowed with pure anger. With a quick flick of her foot, she kicked the heavy envelope right back into the freezing mud. She stood up straight, locked her fierce eyes directly onto the mafia boss, and spoke without an ounce of fear. "Keep your charity," Min-seo demanded, her voice cutting through the cold wind. "I want a real contract, not your scraps. Teach me how this city actually works, and I will show you who is really watching your back." Tae-jun froze. In all his years of running the underworld, no one had ever spoken to him that way, let alone a starving child in the dirt. But as he looked into her sharp, fearless eyes, he saw something rare. He saw a mind that calculated every move like a chess player. Intrigued by her sudden, shocking defiance, Tae-jun made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. He motioned for his men to open the car door and brought the young orphan straight into his dangerous world. Years later, Min-seo walked back through the heavy iron gates of the Grand Kwon estate, but she was no longer the freezing child from the alley. She returned not as a charity case or a guest, but as a quiet, observant maid assigned to care for Tae-jun's young son, Min-jun. While the other servants kept their heads down and avoided the dangerous men who ran the syndicate, Min-seo kept her eyes wide open and her mind working overtime. Within her very first week, she noticed numbers that did not add up. While cleaning the back offices, she intercepted a shipment ledger that looked completely normal to anyone else. But to Min-seo's sharp, trained eyes, the hidden pattern stood out like a sore thumb. She did not wait for an invitation. Instead, she marched straight up to the heavy oak doors of Tae-jun's private study, pushed them open, and walked right in. She slammed the thick stack of papers onto his polished mahogany desk. Tae-jun looked up, his dark eyes flashing with anger at the sudden interruption, but Min-seo did not flinch. "Your logistics chief is bleeding you dry through phantom port fees," she stated clearly, her voice steady and cold. "He is creating fake shipping costs and pocketing millions behind your back." Tae-jun stared at the ledger, then slowly looked up at the young woman standing before him. In that exact moment, the fierce mafia boss realized something shocking. This sharp-eyed young woman was not just a maid keeping the house clean. She was a lethal predator wearing an apron, and she was already running circles around the most dangerous men in the city. Tae-jun knew a brilliant mind when he saw one, and he knew that brute force alone could not protect his empire forever. Recognizing her dangerous tactical skills, he secretly paid for Min-seo to receive an elite education in corporate law and forensic accounting. He pushed her hard to master the complex rules of money and power, treating her like a prized chess piece. Think of it like training a master architect who learns how every single brick in a giant building connects, so they know exactly which wall to break down later. Under his protection, Min-seo spent years studying how dirty money moves across the globe. But as she dug deeper into the syndicate's private files, she got too close to the truth. She started uncovering massive thefts right inside the inner circle, and someone powerful decided she knew too much. An internal hit was ordered, and a bounty was placed on her head by corrupt leaders within her own home. To keep her alive and turn her into the ultimate weapon, Tae-jun and Min-seo made a bold plan. Min-seo staged a fake, dramatic disappearance, making everyone believe she was dead. In secret, she packed her bags and fled all the way to Switzerland under a completely new, fake name. Far away from the dangers of Seoul, she finished mastering the complicated international banking systems and legal machinery. She was no longer just a smart maid. She was building the precise tools required to dismantle organized crime completely from the inside out. Back in Seoul, the shadows of the syndicate began to shift. While Tae-jun was distracted by the empty rooms of his estate and the heavy loss of Min-seo's sudden departure, his most trusted lieutenant saw an opening. Director Kwon had stood by Tae-jun's side for over a decade, earning the boss's complete confidence. But power makes people greedy, and loyalty is often just a price tag waiting to be paid. Quietly and carefully, Kwon initiated a hostile takeover from the inside. Think of it like a parasite slowly eating a giant tree from the roots up while the leaves still look green on top. Kwon engineered a web of complex shell companies hidden away in the Cayman Islands. Day by day, he systematically siphoned millions of dollars right out of the syndicate's main accounts, moving the stolen cash where no one could see it. Even worse, Kwon made sure the digital fingerprints did not point to him. He planted clever digital breadcrumbs, fake email trails, and forged bank wires designed to look like Tae-jun was the one committing the crimes. When the federal investigators finally looked at the data, it would appear as though Tae-jun had been running a massive federal racketeering scheme, laundering dirty money, and committing total treason against his own partners. Tae-jun thought he was running the most secure empire in Korea, but his truest enemy was sitting right next to him at the head table, sharpening the knife in secret. The trial of the century finally arrived, and the atmosphere inside the Seoul district courtroom was thicker than a winter fog. The prosecution presented an airtight case, stacking up digital records, bank transfers, and witness statements that made escape completely impossible. Syndicate boss Kwon Tae-jun sat alone at the defense table, abandoned by all the corrupt allies who had once sworn to protect him. Facing a guaranteed life sentence behind bars, the mighty boss looked entirely beaten by the system he once controlled. The federal judge cleared his throat, picking up his heavy wooden gavel to read the final verdict that would lock Tae-jun away forever. But right before the hammer could fall, the heavy oak courtroom doors flew wide open with a loud bang. Every single head turned toward the back entrance. Down the center aisle walked Min-seo. Her sharp heels clicked steadily against the polished marble floor, echoing through the silent room like a ticking clock. She wore a clean, sharp black suit, and her face was as cold and calm as ice. Tucked securely under her arm was a single, worn leather folder. Without asking for permission, she marched straight down the aisle, stepped past the shocked guards, and walked directly up to the defense table. Looking the stunned judge dead in the eye, she spoke in a clear, ringing voice that filled the entire courtroom. "Your Honor," Min-seo stated calmly, placing her leather folder down on the table next to a speechless Tae-jun. "I am attorney Min-seo, and I am here to formally join the defense as co-counsel." Standing tall before the packed court, Min-seo did not waste a single second. She opened her worn leather folder and walked over to the digital podium, transforming the courtroom into a masterclass in forensic investigation. Think of a master detective pulling a single loose thread on a heavy sweater until the entire jacket completely falls apart. With just a few fast keystrokes, she overrode the court's main display, projecting bright financial charts onto the massive overhead screens for everyone to see. She pointed right at the hidden metadata of the digital files the prosecution had trusted blindly. "The prosecution claims these records prove my client committed money laundering," Min-seo stated, her voice calm, clear, and dripping with absolute authority. "But let us look at the invisible data underneath the ink. With precise clicks, she exposed Director Kang's forged electronic signatures buried deep within the server logs. She traced the stolen money step by step, showing the exact digital footprint as it traveled away from the syndicate accounts and landed directly inside Kang's private, secret offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands. The courtroom went dead silent as the jury watched the massive fraud layout unfold like a movie. Panic flashed across Director Kang's face where he sat in the gallery. But Min-seo was not finished yet. She turned her attention to the state's star witness, a high-ranking accountant who had lied under oath to pin the crimes on Tae-jun. Under Min-seo's razor-sharp cross-examination, the witness completely fell apart. She hit him with hard financial data, exact transaction timestamps, and undeniable proof of his bribes in rapid succession. Within minutes, the witness broke down, dropped his head in his hands, and confessed publicly that Director Kang had forced him to lie. The airtight case built by the state was shattered into a million pieces. In front of the entire judge and jury, Min-seo proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that syndicate boss Kwon Tae-jun had been completely framed by his own greedy second-in-command. Cornered, exposed, and stripped of his lies, Director Kang lost all control. Seeing his grand plan crumble before the judge and jury, a wild, desperate look took over his face. With a furious roar, he vaulted right over the wooden railing of the gallery, pulling a hidden steel blade from his jacket. He lunged straight across the open floor, aiming a deadly strike directly at Tae-jun's heart. In a fraction of a second, decades of dangerous underworld survival took over. Tae-jun's violent mafia instincts flared instantly. His eyes darkened, his muscles tensed, and his hand dropped like lightning toward his inner coat pocket to grab his own hidden weapon. He was ready to protect his life the only way he had ever known, with absolute, brutal force. But before Tae-jun's fingers could wrap around the grip of his gun, Min-seo moved. With surprising speed, she stepped firmly right between the two deadly men, planting her feet on the marble floor. She reached out and grabbed Tae-jun's wrist with a strong, unyielding grip, stopping his hand completely. "Not like this," Min-seo commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like steel. She stared deeply into his dark, surprised eyes, holding his gaze with total authority. "We use the law, not the gutter." Tae-jun froze, the wild fire in his eyes fading as he looked at the brilliant young woman who had saved him twice now, once on the freezing streets, and now inside a court of law. He slowly let go of his weapon. At that exact second, heavy boots slammed against the marble as federal marshals swarmed into the room from all sides. They tackled Director Kang midair, slamming him hard onto the floor and pinning him down with heavy force as the silver handcuffs clicked tightly into place. The threat was over, handled not by blood and bullets, but by justice. With the dangerous traitor finally locked behind bars and handcuffs and all the fake federal charges completely dropped, the dark cloud hanging over the Kwon name vanished. But instead of returning to his old ways or trying to rebuild his broken criminal empire, Tae-jun made a shocking choice. He looked at the wreckage of his past and realized that true power did not come from fear or shadows. Guided by Min-seo's brilliant vision, he chose a completely new path. Instead of running a syndicate, they dismantled the entire criminal infrastructure piece by piece, just like a master builder tearing down an unsafe, rotting house to build something strong and honest in its place. All of the dangerous compounds, hidden properties, and dirty cash assets were legally handed over through the courts. They converted the stolen wealth into a massive multi-million-dollar community trust fund. The old, illegal smuggling routes were turned into clean, legitimate logistics networks that created honest jobs for thousands of people across the city. Most importantly, they funded rows of free legal aid clinics right in the middle of the poor neighborhoods of Seoul, the very same kind of streets where Min-seo had once fought just to survive as a child. In the end, they completely transformed a dark legacy of fear and blood into an enduring institution of absolute accountability, second chances, and true redemption.